Okay, so now I have my solder, and I have my torch, and I have everything set up exactly the way I want it. The brace is really the variable here. That's the part that can move a lot. So I'm going to start by heating the lead pipe and the brace. I have a pretty high flame, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit. And as soon as you see a plume of smoke like that, you want to start feeding some solder. And you don't want to heat the solder with the torch. You want the metal, the heat of the metal to melt the solder. So the torch should not be melting the solder. If it does melt the solder, you may have a cold solder joint, which means it'll break. Okay, and I'm only going to put a little bit of solder in here. I'm not going to really fill it up. Just enough to make a nice solid joint, and I don't want to have a lot to scrape. Okay, I flip it around, I do the other side. It's surprisingly fast. Okay, and it looks like I needed a little more flux back here, so I'm going to put some on now. And that will just clean the metal a little more so that the solder sticks. Notice I'm not heating the solder. I heat the metal, then the solder is heated by the metal. Alright, I'm happy with that. Now I solder the actual receiver. You just heat up the receiver with the lead pipe in it. You want to heat the whole thing. You want to make sure you have enough in there. You can't really put too much in without seeing it come out the other end. So far I'm good. There's a fair amount of space there. Okay, now I see it just trickling down to the other ends. And you can see I have a little drop of it here. Just flick that off. Clean this up. Be careful not to hit it in my face. Tubes have a funny way of separating when they're heated, so I'm going to tap it at the end to make sure it's seated all the way. And then I'm just going to do a little cleanup on the braces, because when you have a hot torch, that's really your chance to clean up any leftover solder spots you don't want. You shouldn't touch the horn after soldering it like that. I just don't have any feeling in my fingers anymore. Okay. Alright, there, and I cleaned it up a little bit. And believe it or not, that was the hard part. Now it's done. Now really all I have to do is scrape the solder off, clean it up, depending on if I want to re-lacquer it or replate it. You can re-lacquer by buying a high quality can lacquer. I wouldn't buy the stuff that's for wood. You know, buy something that's for metal. And you can go to Freeze or some other places online and buy a lacquer that will work really well to match up with the original brass lacquer. They come in different colors if you get them through instrument supply places. If you want to plate it, sometimes in almost every fair-sized town, there are pen plating companies, and they're usually known as jewelers. Jewelers usually have a pen plating kit, maybe even a tank, but you would need pen plating to go back and silver or gold plate this. Gold plating, I would say you probably shouldn't do this kind of work unless you want to destroy the gold plating. Silver, I think it's safe to say you can have the pen plated and kind of matched up. Sometimes even it could look perfect. I've done a lot of repairs and pen plated after. So you can also buy your own pen plating kit at a place online called Caswell Plating, C-A-S-W-E-L-L. Caswell offers a full line of plating kits, and quite a few instrument manufacturing and repair places use Caswell plating. So let me check that out. Now I'm letting it cool, but as soon as it's finished, we'll clean it up a little bit, and then we're going to put an insert in there and go try it. Alright, it's cooled. I'm going to take the clips off. If this were wire, you may want to clip the wire. Just use real fine gauge wire to hold things on. And I don't really have a lot to clean up. And I'm not really going to clean up a lot because this is an old horn. but I'm just going to come in here and scrape a little bit. And the scrapers that we use here at Harrelson Trumpets are all handmade. They're just scrap brass that we sharpen on grinders and sanders so that we can remove any excess solder where we see it. And because it's brass, it doesn't scratch the instrument nearly as easily as a steel scraper. We do not use steel scrapers on instruments here. Alright, there's not really a whole lot to scrape. Hopefully that's the case on your project. A tip on scraping: it's safer to scrape with both thumbs rather than just pushing with one hand or both hands. I'm holding back with one thumb while I'm pushing forward with the other. That's a hand engraving technique that I learned from an old engraving book. When you're engraving, you want to push your thumbs opposing each other so you can very carefully apply pressure in one direction without slipping. If you slip, you can cut your thumb or gouge the instrument. So that's a really good rule of thumb. I don't think anyone ever laughs at anything I say. All right, flip this around. Okay, and like I said, I'm not going to do a lot of cleanup. That's intentional because I want people to see really the raw look of this. I'll probably show some that are finished another day, maybe a few months down the road. But for now, that's it. We're going to go play this horn. I'm going to go reassemble it. There's our little receiver, and I'll grab some inserts on the way. Okay, so now we're in the finishing room, and the first thing I'm going to do is swab out the pistons, or I'm sorry, the valve casings, because it was on a stand, and that stand could have had dirt on it, and we don't want any dirt in your valves, even if it is an old horn. You don't want valve issues just because you changed your receiver. So I swab them out. They look pretty clean. These valves, I don't think have been oiled in years. Must have been sitting on a shelf. So I'll get some oil. We'll put them in and we'll play it. Nice thing about some Bach pounds is a lot of times they don't have really tight tolerances on the pistons, so then they can be fairly dirty and still work just fine. So I kind of like that. Even though tighter compression is better, you also want a horn that can go together pretty quick. So now the horn is put back together. Take my gloves off. I'm going to spray it with a little bit of alcohol everywhere that I used flux. And I'm just going to wipe it off. If this were your horn at home, I would say maybe do a little more than that. You might want to buff it again. Or if you're going for a brush finish, take some 3M pad or whatever it is you're using and rebrush it. But for now, I'm not going to do a whole lot. Now I'm going to take some oil. This is just valve oil. And after I use the alcohol, I'm going to use a little valve oil. And I'm going to rub that all over the same area because the oil helps remove a lot of that flux and debris as well. Okay, I feel comfortable with that. Looks nice. Now I'm going to put a little grease on the threads, and the adjustable gap receiver was designed with some really special threads. They're only 16 teeth per inch, and they're double start threads, which means there are 10 threads on this tube, but you only have to screw it together 5 rotations. Putting a little grease on there will definitely prevent any issues in the future. For instance, having this get stuck from corrosion. Okay, now it's together. Now that it's together, we can test it, but I didn't put a shim in, or I should say an insert, I'm going to wipe that little bit of grease off. And I also didn't remove this number, and I didn't really do much with this receiver. And that's because the receiver that I chose today is one of the earliest ones I made in production, and it was one of my first runs. And the same with this mount. It still has a number 5 on it because it hasn't even been finished. So these are just parts that came right out of the machine. They haven't even been touched or sanded or anything in any way, polished. So there, it fits together perfect. There's no insert in here. And of course the whole point is to have the inserts, but I'm going to play it without because I love to experiment and do things that have never been done. And I personally like the way they feel without an insert. I know that because I built a brand new Summit the other day and I used the first AGR on that. But this is the first one ever on a Retrofit. Okay, so without an insert, by mistake, the AGR actually plays very well, and I'm going to be making some inserts that replicate that, but then do close the gap. But I just want all of you to know, if you're watching this video, one of the best ways to play with the AGR is without an insert, and it's really surprising. It surprised me at first, but it feels great. It's pretty nice. Now I'm going to grab some actual inserts. All right, so I have a set of 9 shims here, or I'm sorry, inserts. We call these inserts. And the 9 inserts come as a set. When you buy an adjustable gap receiver, you get 5. And I'll just explain them very quickly. Each insert is abbreviated from the actual measurement of the amount of tubing inside. So the one that's labeled 2 is actually 20 thousandths of tubing, or 20 thousandths of gap. The one that's 4 is 40 thousandths, and so on and so forth. They go from 0 all the way to 18. Because when you get to 18, then it's just a purely open tube. It would replicate a regular receiver. Okay, so with these, you can interchange them in the receiver itself. So I just pull the receiver off. And you can put whichever one you want on there. I'm just going to randomly grab one and put it in. And it just snaps right onto the end of the mount. All right, and the first time they're used, they may just snap on like that. Then I close it. Okay. Now it fits, and I'm just going to play it. You don't really need to measure the gap if you have a set of these, because you could just play until you find the one you like. Or you could use the gap measurement tool and find the gap each time and decide which one you want from numbers. Does feel better. Now I do want to know the measurements, so I'm just going to compare it to what it was before, and it looks like it's fairly close to the original. So I'm going to try one that creates a little less gap, actually a lot less gap. So I pull that one off, and I can measure which one it is, because there are 2 lines on the outside, and those lines represent how much space the length of the gap is. So this one's fairly wide, which is not a surprise. I'm going to go to the smallest one, which is number 2. And because I already know which type of mouthpiece I play on and where it sits, I know that the number 2 is probably going to be the solution that I need. So I'm guessing that I could work with number 2 or number 0. No, I don't think I got it on there quite right. There we go. Okay, and the first time you put them on, there may be a little snap, because everything fits very snug. All right, there's number 2. It feels very, very flexible. Compared to what it was a few minutes ago, I mean, what was it, 20 minutes ago that I played it with the original receiver, and it feels really good. pushing the limits of this Bach. Okay, so it is still a Bach, but a 3-octave slur isn't bad. All I did was adjust the gap, and I did it with an adjustable gap receiver. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and once again, I'll show you all the components. We have a receiver, we have the mount, and just snapped on the end of the mount right here is the insert, and these inserts come in 19 sizes. I recommend just the basic set of 5, but you can get sets of 5, 9, or 19. And one other note, you can order these custom so that they create a smaller or larger venturi for your lead pipe. And I'll film another video on that at some other point. But if your horn is too open, or if it feels like it backs up on you in the upper register, that usually is a sign that it's actually too large of a venturi. You could custom order a venturi, a special venturi insert that makes it a little smaller and aids in the upper register. And overall, I would say that I'm very happy with the results. Of course, I'd love to hear what you think, and I'd love to see YouTube videos of people installing these so you can share with others. And if you have any questions, send me an email at harrelsontrumpets@gmail.com or go to our website, harrelsontrumpets.com. Thanks.